What if the financial advice most of us grew up with was just wrong? Today we're diving into Rich Dad, Poor Dad, a book that's all about the lessons from two very different father figures. One was a super smart academic who, despite his education, always struggled with money. The other, a high school dropout who ended up becoming one of the richest men in Hawaii. Their completely opposite ways of thinking reveal a whole new playbook for how to think about building wealth.
So think about it. Most of us heard this on repeat. Go to school, get good grades, land a safe, secure job, and you'll be set for life. But this book throws a huge wrench in that plan. It argues that in today's world, that advice isn't just outdated, it might be actively bad advice. In fact, sticking to that safe path could be one of the riskiest things you do with your finances.
And this slide right here, this just nails the core difference between the two dads. Poor Dad's advice was always, study hard so you can find a good company to work for. But Rich Dad's advice was, study hard so you can find a good company to buy. See the difference? One mindset trains you to be a great employee. The other one trains you to be the owner.
And their core beliefs about money itself couldn't be more different. Poor Dad always said that the love of money is the root of all evil. It's a phrase we've all heard, right? Well, Rich Dad flipped it on its head. He believed that the lack of money is the root of all evil, arguing that it's the constant struggle for money that causes greed, fear, and desperation. This one single difference in belief shaped every single financial decision they made.
So this huge difference in mindset really leads you down one of two very different roads. And according to the book, following that traditional poor dad philosophy, it leads most people straight into a financial trap that it calls the rat race.
So what exactly is the rat race?
Well, it's described as this endless, exhausting cycle. You get a job to make money, but that money immediately flows right back out. It goes to the government and taxes, to the bank for your mortgage or car loan, and to the credit card companies. You're working your tail off, but you're not actually getting anywhere. You're just spinning the wheel faster and faster just to keep the lights on.
And here's a look at that cycle in action. You get a job, you get your paycheck, and then you watch it disappear to cover all your expenses. So what's the logical next step? You work harder, right? You aim for that raise or promotion. But here's the kicker. When you finally get it, your taxes go up, your spending goes up, and you end up right back where you started. You're still trapped, just running on a slightly bigger, slightly fancier hamster wheel.
And this is what makes the trap so darn hard to get out of. It's not just a personal problem, it's a generational one. See, when you're caught in the rat race, you often don't know any other way. So what happens? You pass that same safe advice down to your own kids, pretty much locking them into the very same cycle for another generation.
All right, so how do you even begin to escape? Well, the first lesson is fascinating because it has nothing to do with budgets or investing. It's all about the words you use, because your words can either shut your brain down or they can fire it up.
Poor Dad's go-to phrase was often, "I can't afford it." And that's a statement, right? It's a full stop. It ends all creative thinking. But Rich Dad, he literally forbade using those words. Instead, he forced a reframe. You had to ask the question, how can I afford it? That simple little switch from a statement to a question forces your brain to get to work and start looking for solutions.
You see, Rich Dad saw the mind as a muscle. Every time you say, I can't afford it, you're letting that muscle get weak. You're basically telling it not to bother trying. But when you ask, how can I afford it? That's the workout. That's the exercise that builds up your financial intelligence and opens your eyes to possibilities you never would have seen before.
So here's your first challenge, something you can do today. The very next time that thought, oh, I can't afford that, pops into your head, just pause, catch it, and then consciously rephrase it as a question. How can I afford it? You don't even have to find the answer right away. The goal is just to do the mental push-up and get your brain in the habit of solving problems instead of accepting limits.
Now, once you start making that mental shift, it leads you right into the second and maybe the most important lesson of them all. And this one is all about who or what is actually doing the work.
For most of us, the deal is pretty straightforward. We trade our time for money. You put in the hours, you get a paycheck. It's a direct exchange. The problem? If you stop working, well, the money stops coming in. Simple as that.
But the rich play a totally different game. They don't focus on their paycheck, they focus on building or buying assets. And an asset is just something that puts money in your pocket, whether you show up to work or not. Think of real estate, stocks, a business. The goal is to build a system where your money is the employee, working for you 24/7, so that eventually you don't have to. So if that second path is so much better, why do most people stay on the first one? Well, the book argues it boils down to one powerful emotion: fear. The fear of not being able to pay your bills, the fear of getting fired, the fear of just not having enough money. It's so strong that it keeps people clinging to that illusion of a secure paycheck, even if it's trapping them. And to really hammer this lesson home, Rich Dad gave the author a very practical and, honestly, a pretty harsh lesson when he was just 9 years old. It all started with his very first job. His first wage was a whopping 10 cents an hour. Yeah, for 3 hours every single Saturday, he and his friend would just dust old canned goods in one of Rich Dad's convenience stores. It was mind-numbingly boring work for a paycheck that could barely buy a comic book.
After just a few weeks of this, he was completely fed up. He felt used, underpaid, and ready to quit. And you know what? That was exactly the point of the lesson. Rich Dad later told him that feeling of working so hard for a paycheck that just never seems to be enough, that's a taste of life for millions of employees every single day.
But then came the real twist. When the author finally went to demand a raise, Rich Dad came back with a counteroffer. He said he would continue to teach him about money, but from that point forward, he had to work for absolutely nothing. $0, 0 cents.
So what on earth was the lesson here? Well, by working for free, he was forced to break his dependency on a paycheck. Rich Dad took the wage away to force him to stop thinking like an employee who just works for their hourly rate. Instead, he had to start using his brain to spot the other money-making opportunities that were literally all around him, opportunities he was completely blind to when all he could think about was earning his 10 cents.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap of the big ideas here. First, that old advice to get a safe job might actually be the riskiest financial strategy today. Second, the real goal isn't just to get a raise, to run faster in the rat race, it's to find a way to get out of it completely. You can start that process today by changing your words and asking, how can I afford it? And finally, the ultimate shift is to move from working for money to learning how to make your money work for you.
When you boil it all down, it comes back to this one powerful idea. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. This isn't just about being wealthy. It's a completely different strategy for life. One path is about being an employee. The other is about becoming an owner and an investor.
You know, the book doesn't just give you a bunch of information. It really presents you with a choice. It lays out two very clear paths ahead of you, the path of working for your money and the path of having your money work for you. So the real question it leaves us with is this. Now that you know the two paths exist, which one are you going to start learning more about today?